Israeli Hasbara sucks. Hasbara is just explaining.
Hasbara is a Hebrew word that literally means explanation or public diplomacy. In practice, it refers to efforts, both by the Israeli government and private citizens, to defend, justify or promote Israel's policies, actions and image to foreign audiences.
I do want to say that there are objective challenges like numbers and the fact that the path we are offering is a bit harder to follow than the other path. There are no more excuses. Here is the time to face reality. Hasbara sucks. This video was supposed to be only in Hebrew, but I did write down the points I'm gonna make in English for my friend to review. And he said, you have to make it in English as well. So here I am. There are 3 reasons why Israeli Hasbara fails. Here is number 1. Me. Basically, Israeli Hasbara focuses on Israel and only Israel. There is something very unattractive about somebody who's screaming, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I'm going to explain how it differs from the other side a little bit later. Anyway, so on one hand, Israelis are very straightforward. Jews are very straightforward. They're being attacked. They're explaining, right? People are saying there is a genocide. And yes, some people are like, but like, this is not how genocide looks like. This is not the definition. And we're talking with people who don't care about the dictionary definition because what they're looking for is empathy. And the Israeli side doesn't show empathy. They don't understand what the other side is actually looking for, what would convince them. Logic and reasoning are great, but kind of autistic. Also, focusing on me, instead of looking around and realizing that there is a person in front of you. Sometimes, the best defense is not even offense, but asking them about themselves. And Israelis, I don't think, do that enough. And for many people, I think, they don't get to meet a lot of us. Sometimes they only get to talk to one, because even when they get to talk to an Israeli, Israelis are not that friendly. Still in the realm of me, trying to get too much attention. For example, now there was this trip that Trump had to Saudi Arabia. And a lot of Israelis I saw in the Israeli media was like, wait, why isn't Israel there? And I was like, just come on, get your noses out of it, okay? Your Jewish noses. It's nice you want to be involved. Yes, it is about you. But guess what? You don't have to cooperate, right? If you weren't invited, you're not obligated to follow through. Second, if Trump is meeting effing Giuliani, you know what? Say thank you. Thank you, we're not there. Everybody has a right to meet whoever they want, to experiment, to check out, to understand reality through their own experiences, even if it means that they're gonna make something that it would be perceived as a mistake in Israel, like meeting Giuliani, who is an ISIS member, Al-Qaeda, HTS, whatever, it's all the same. Let them do that, okay? Let. It's weird if you're gatekeeping or not allowing other world leaders to meet someone. That would be weird. And at the same time, if somebody is meeting Giuliani, it's actually a good idea not to be in the room sometimes, so that when people look back and think, well, Israel was not there, so yeah. So attention seeking and trying to be involved with everything, even if it's the Middle East, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to. Here's another thing, sticking out like a sore thumb. So Israelis, when they are explaining Israel, they are very proud of their country and they have their flags and everything's great, except that is also some way of not showing empathy in a world where a lot of countries don't display their flags like that. Barely Americans do that, and Americans used to do it the most. And if you really, really dig into your soul, you'd remember that even that was perceived as kind of annoying. Israelis being so proud and shouting is great, but damn, read the room. And yeah, so it is also kind of like playing into the no empathy, as well as in, here, look at me, look at me, look at me. And concentrate on me. Great, not amazing. Actually kind of a failure. I don't think Israelis should not do that. But there is a time and a place. And the last thing I'm gonna say, under this realm of me, and attention seeking is the stupid slogans Israelis use. I mean, Am Yisrael Chai, whatever. Good. It's okay. But no Jews, no news. Yes, it is true. Okay, it is true. But think about it differently. Just because it's true, it doesn't serve the purpose, you know. If you say, hey, look at what's happening to the Yazidis, and why is nobody paying attention, and there's like no Jews, no news, then you just inserted the Jews to the equation. And you want to make them forget about the Jews for a little bit and focus on the Yazidis. It just happens to be that the Yazidis have the same enemy as we do. So slogans like that, yeah, they're also attention seeking. So the second part is not understanding who we are up against, not knowing what wokeism is, not knowing what the far right is, and not knowing what Islam is. I'm going to break down those groups and what drives them. Not even one group here is driven by facts at all. Jews love debate, but not everyone, all right? So because of that, yeah, you're gonna lose. Here's why. When you tell them facts, they don't really care because what drives them is something completely different. For example, I'm gonna talk about 3 groups here. Number 1, woke. So 10% of the woke, let's say the woke leaders, don't follow into the description I'm gonna give. But here's the thing. For the rest of the 90%, okay, we're talking about people who are looking for a community. They want to belong. They want to be part of a group. They want to have friends. They want to do that. And guess what, Hasbara? Do you offer a community? Do you open up spaces for them? Are they part of a group? You see, those encampments, they literally had rules that they were forbidden from speaking to the press, to anyone. If you just approach a wokester, right, in an encampment, and there are plenty of videos like that, and ask them what they think, well, they don't think. And if you go to a protest and ask them what they think, they don't think. They don't think, and this is what they love about it, all right? They are not looking to think. They want to be part of something. That's it. And if you don't offer that, then you don't offer anything, because you bring facts. That's thinking, and believe me, they're not looking for that. And then you have the 10% that are not actually woke, right? They're not the wokesters. Those are the ones who knew exactly what they were doing, that are motivated by similar things to what the far right and Islam is motivated by. So I'm gonna just go ahead and talk about those. All right, the far right. The far right is different because right now it's small. So those are people who are not, they don't fit into the woke movement, but not necessarily because they don't have the same mindset as them. It's just that they either have different ideologies, which is, you can have a similar mindset, but different set of rules. It's just that they're not necessarily looking for what's the most ethical, moral thing to do, as much as they want to preserve or like fight for something. And maybe those things are not exactly the same. By the way, inside the woke movement, there are people who are also starting to argue, especially those who are in the leader positions, because they realize that even among themselves, they don't always agree. Anyway, the far right people right now mostly are people who want to have influence. They want to feel like they have power. They target Jews for the same reason Hitler did. He saw the Jews as the only real competitors the Aryans might have. They just want the power they think the Jews have. Like, listen, nothing personal, okay? Just bring down your competition. And they think the Jews are their competition. Not completely wrong, I have to say. Because what they're looking for might be, let me go to Islam. Why Islam? Because I think more than anyone else, Islam has actually the most defined and refined and clear-minded opposition to Judaism. Here is what I heard many times from Arabs, Muslims, especially Palestinians, who understand their neighbors somewhat. And when they're asked what's wrong with the Jews, they say, well, everybody knows that the Jews take away your freedom. And they are correct, because here's the thing, Judaism, before I go to Judaism, let me explain what freedom is. So imagine you could do whatever you want to do because you have the power to do so. Then why wouldn't you if you have the freedom to do so? Well, imagine that somebody tells you, no, you're not allowed to do this or that, but you can. You have the money, you have the power, you have the audience, you have the clout. Why would you need to restrict yourself? So for those who understand at their core what this conflict is about, they can articulate. For them, the Jews with their ideas are like shackles. You see, I made a video about the greatness of Islam, where I explained the difference between those who understand Islam and those who just submit to Islam. And it's a very, very similar dynamic to the wokesters who don't think versus those who arrange those encampments. Okay? They want to be part of a group. Islam provides that. They perfected the in-group belonging kind of art until you are suffering the consequences of the fact that you allowed someone else to have a complete control over you. Which is, yes, what the Muhammadans, what those who understand how to read the Quran actually look for. Now, the third huge failure of Hasbara is not understanding Judaism. Here are 3 things Judaism introduced to the world and why, by introducing those ideas, they created mortal enemies. And I started with the obvious, the lack of freedoms. In Judaism, if you're a king, you are obligated to carry the Torah with you and follow it. You have restrictions. You are not allowed to do whatever you want to do. Nope. And there is a moral code, an ethic code, and the law still applies. It doesn't matter who you are. Every king is criticized. Every prophet is criticized. Is there a major figure in Judaism that is not? No. And that is to those who have power, like men do, for example, in Islam. Why would they give up on that? And by the way, women in Islam, they also have power that they don't have in Judaism. They can do whatever they want, sometimes to their children, depending on the system they're part of. But if they can't even do that, then believe me, they're so oppressed that, yeah, that's a different problem. Anyway, it's not just law and also commandments that are on the positive sense. So there are like laws, and then there are mitzvot, things that are you have to do, but nobody's gonna come and punish you. But it's like a good thing to do, right? It's like so Judaism really has its ethics down, and it applies universally, all right? So no matter how much power you accumulate, Judaism puts limitations, and that is not something every person can agree with, honestly speaking. Concepts like we were all created in the image of God, it's also like it's the only how can I explain it? It's the only society, it's the only group of people on earth that wrote it down and made it a principle, okay? The rest day, Sabbath, any kind of rest day, the weekend, as you know it, Jewish invention, 100%. Social justice, taking care of orphans and widows and the poor, Jewish as well. So there is also a strong sense of community in Judaism and taking care of each other. I know a lot of people focus on money, but from what I've heard, for example, in Russia, it's actually the fact that the household was very loving, at least stereotypically, a lot more solid, is what generated the most amount of jealousy in the society. Not necessarily the amount of money someone had. So community is very strong and not enough people talk about it, I think. And those principles also are the principles that are the key for the success, because there is room for failure because you have a community that would support you. By the way, Islam would have died a long time ago if apostasy was allowed. Let's be honest. You go in and then you start suffering the consequences of not wanting to think. At some point that comes back to bite you. Well, here's the second principle Judaism has. The second thing is, of course, debate. Out of all the religions in the world, out of all the cultures in the world, Judaism is the most in-your-face kind of communication, the most argumentative, the most debate-oriented. It's ingrained. And like I said before, every king is criticized. So how do you think it makes those who hate criticism? What do you think they would feel about Judaism? The third element Judaism is not confused about is the willingness to die. There are things in Judaism where it is a commandment to choose death. One is if somebody comes to you, pointing a gun to your head and says, it's either you or your friend, and you are supposed to be doing the shooting, or maybe even if not, you will not kill your friend, even if that would guarantee your death. In Judaism, you are obligated to choose death over the killing of an innocent, over a murder would be more accurate. Another thing, I actually don't want to get into the other two right now because it's a little bit more in the taboo areas, all right? Because it's more complex, but basically that's an important one. And the willingness to kill as well, those who come to kill you, kill them first. That is another thing that is very different from love your enemy and pray for them and give the other cheek. The willingness to die for your principles, it's on the individual level. Every person that is Jewish grows up with that mindset. There is a good reason to why so many Jews ran into the fire on October 7th because of commandments like Al Ta'amod Al Dam Ra'acha, like the obligation to help others, the understanding that your life is not worth more than someone else's life, so you don't want to be the cause of death. Also, like the obligation to fight against your enemies. And when, for example, someone is murdered, you attach to their name, when you mention them, you say, Hayudaled, Hashem Yikom Damo, God will avenge his death, his blood. Those three, actually I didn't mention it, but it's also, Judaism has a very strong sense of community. So it's fourth, okay, fourth. I couldn't do it three. So there is room for debate. There is room for exploration. There is room for, and there are clear moral ethics. And that creates a very strong society. So that brings me to actually, let's talk about how to do Hasbara that might work. First thing first, Hasbara is not the way you should approach it. Don't call it that. So here's the approach I'm suggesting. And I think I said it once in a live. I started singing this very emotional song saying, the greatest deed in the world is to help someone else. And yeah, it would be nice, not only because we need to divert the attention to somewhere else, that would be nice, but actually because the world needs us right now, just like it needed us 2,000 years ago when Judaism invented something that is called Christianity, that brought about a moral system and ethics to a world that needed it very, very badly. I don't want to go in right now about the points where it diverged from Judaism, but the reality is that Judaism is the mother, father, birth Christianity, and those apostles and first believers and people who spread it were Jews. And they wanted, I think, more than anything, to introduce the morality and the ethics the world needed so much. I'm going to go back to Christianity, but here's the thing. I'm going to split the world into three regions. I call it the West, the East, and the Arabs. You can say Iran is something between Arabs and East, but you get my gist. Here are the way things are right now. The West suffers from identity crisis. I think more than anything, this is how you can describe what is going on in the West right now. So there is a problem of understanding who you are, what do you stand for, and knowing how to stand your ground. What matters, what doesn't matter, what's important, what's not important. And the way to maybe approach it is actually to try to emphasize as much as possible the moral principles, the things that the West stands for, whether it's the Magna Carta or the secular rights, the codex that was written after or during the French Revolution that explained what principles the French stand for, whether it's the Constitution. Just focusing on the history of the West, bringing pride and understanding. And maybe Germany is different because Germany was unified relatively recently. And it's not like France or England or the United States. But even so, I think there is a lot to appreciate and cherish and focus on those principles when you build your identity. It's not always that it is well structured to begin with. This is the crisis the West is having right now. So that's a job that needs to be done. The West needs to relearn, to learn those stories, to understand them. This draw for the exotic had made a lot of people rewrite what the Muslim conquest was really like, to reimagine why the Crusaders went to war, to turn in Vlad Dracula into Dracula, to this vampire, but not to tell his actual story and how he was traumatized and how awful his interactions were with the Ottomans and how he fought for Christianity against the barbaric principles of Islam. The East is actually where Christianity is growing extremely fast. And why? China is going to probably become the country with the most Christians in the world rather soon, because unlike the West, when it comes to the East, the moral principles that were like, a breath of fresh air that spread with Christianity, well, they didn't reach the East. So the cold-hearted, bureaucratic, strict kind of thinking in society is, to this day, what the East is like. And those rigid structures, they weigh down on them. The East is not necessarily my realm of expertise, so I'm going to stop it here. And then the Arabs. The Arabs live in constant fear of conquest. There is a reason why many Israelis believe that taking land is the greatest form of punishment when it comes to the Arabs. Conquest and getting conquered, and it is their biggest trauma, as well as the most core principles that appear in the Quran, like conquest is like fundamental, jihad is fundamental. Yeah. And they also have a complete lack of moral system. So let's say I made a video of what happens if Israel disappears. Well, the moment Israel disappears, there are going to be several countries, entities, groups that would try to establish a caliphate. When they do that, they're going to slaughter anyone else. So the Turks, the Egyptians, HTS, ISIS-like groups, the Saudis, the Shiites, the Iranians, they're all gonna try to establish a world-dominant caliphate. And that would be a complete bloodbath. So for them, Israel stops that scenario from happening. Everybody is busy with the fact it's there. It's actually like stopping that kind of conflict from really happening, even though it is very much happening in Iraq, in Libya, for example, as well. But that is the situation. It's a harder case than the West and the East. The language you can use against the Arabs is actually kind of the Hasbara, the way it is right now. It's almost like the Hasbara that we have was mostly written, created with Arabs in mind. It's very powerful, it's very strong, it's very out there, This is like how you face Arabs. So out of all the groups, Arabs are the one who understand that form of Hasbara the best, I think. It can be even more in your face, but you also need to understand that it's not Hasbara, it's intimidation. So the Israeli Hasbara, more than anything, when it faces the Arab world, it's intimidation, and at the same time, it's like, for those who don't like the society they live in, who understand the problems with Islam, who don't like the fact that there is complete freedom for those who have power, it is very attractive. And so it's a very different form of communication. But even then, when you do it, right, you need to understand what Islam is and who you are, and stay firm in it, and understand that more than anything, they need to see force. They need to see like pride. They need to see Israel being strong and like projecting its identity, because that's the language of the Middle East. On the other hand, they need to also understand that we are better. It's very much, we are in conflict, and there isn't a lot that can be done there anyway, except for making sure that when Israel is attacking, they flee. Okay, so in a way, what I just said, this is what the Palestinians did. They noticed what pains are the most prevalent in society. It's almost kind of predatory, I'm not gonna lie. But for women who felt like they're being discriminated against, they had presented themselves as feminists. For those who felt racism, perceived or real, Black Lives Matter, you would never know that those behind it were anarchists that didn't care even a little bit about Black Lives Matter, but in the end of the day, while they were showing this empathy and understanding of what people need, creating communities, creating safe spaces, fighting for causes, they never really ever meant anything. They just showed understanding of their victims. And in the end of it, they always remembered to sophisticatingly and in various manners, in a very roundabout ways, to insert their agenda. Islam, Arabism. Why is Islam even perceived as a form of ethnic whatever? It's not an ethnicity. It's not. And yet it is perceived that way. So they had created an image. So they inserted, they took those causes and they didn't forget the last step, which is to insert themselves in. So I want to bring several examples where Jews created something that helped humanity and failed at that part. So let me start with Christianity. Christianity, like I said, was a Jewish invention. But being taken over by the Romans still wanted to have their authorities. They couldn't have it exactly completely free. So it was a kind of a mix between the ideologies. And because of that, it was not as tolerant to debate. And maybe Christianity wasn't as tolerant to debate to begin with, because it required such a leap of faith, like believing that somebody got resurrected, and that limits debate. But in general, there was a conflict between the chaos, debate, criticize the king kind of people, which are the Jews, and the authorities. So more than anything, when it comes to Christianity, it did create a very complex relationship with Christianity, but Jews did insert themselves into Christianity, meaning evangelics, Protestants, people who maybe took the more independent path of understanding Christianity. Some of them chose to also be more open towards Judaism and Jews. And now we can see that this insertion of Judaism into Christianity did make a difference. It did make this collaboration between Judaism and Christianity possible. The second thing I would say is Hollywood. So Hollywood had a lot to do with shaping America the way it is now, introducing the idea of the American dream and how America needs to be, and the idea that you can come and from whatever background and you can make it here. And that is completely 1% a Jewish idea that was spread via Hollywood. Except there, the Jews never bothered to explain where that comes from and how much it is just a reflection of concepts that are ingrained in Judaism, and how much it is actually the Jewish wish on America to have that dream life that created that. Of course, Hollywood is Chinese now, so we can see how crappy that is. But originally, this wholesome all-American dream was a Jewish invention, something that they never took enough credit for. It's not only that helping others is important, it's also important to make sure that people understand the mechanisms behind the help. In the end of the day, we can see that those who go around and support Israel the most are people who were usually personally inspired or got help. Even people from South Sudan. When no one was there for the Christians in South Sudan, Israel stepped up. And to this day, they're thankful for it. And that's something that I saw repeating. Wherever Israel helped, they remember. So there is merit to that. But obviously, right now, It's not necessarily that Israelis have to do that. It's actually a very bad idea if Israelis would do that. But because we have the basic understanding of that, going around and giving others the tools to do it, because we have it ingrained in our culture, letting them spread the message and hoping that they would explain that those are Judeo-Christian principles. And let's be honest, those are Jewish principles. Maybe that is the thing that would actually help. I think a lot of the reason of why Jews could have revived themselves the way they did is because of Christians who were aware, like Thomas Jefferson, who were acutely aware that Judaism is where that greatness came from. So there is a long path ahead of us, and I hope you're in it with me. All right, like, comment, subscribe, and if you guys could help my channel, that would really help. I have links below, Patreon and buy me coffee or PayPal, whatever. There is also an option to leave a super thanks in the comments. I would really appreciate your help so I can keep doing what I'm doing. And thank you all for being here, and see you later.